Well, you know what really cool thing about doing the closed caption part of it through YouTube is it puts times associated with when you said something. So when you download the closed caption file, it's basically a Word document. But when you download it, it also includes all these times at which were said. So if you wanted to get really detailed on your show notes, you know, what's discussed in the show? Well, at minute 450 or whatever, we were talking about, International Podcast Day. But at, 3 minutes and 12 seconds, we were talking about, the Batmobile, whatever it is. You'd have an easy way to direct your listeners to just the content that they want to hear about.
Just in case you're wondering, this is Podcast by Friday, and I am Kingsley Grant.
And I'm Bill Griggs.
And you're listening to Podcast by Friday,
where we help you to create your minimal viable podcast by taking bold action to defeat procrastination and get your voice heard. And this is episode 11. And on today's episode, you will hear Bill and I talk about transcripts, timestamps, and audio extractions from video and how you can use that in your podcast episode. You will hear us talk about a number of other tools and tips that would expedite and make your processing a whole lot easier. So let's begin by listening to Bill as he describes the audio extraction from a video and what he found out.
One thing I discovered this week was playing around. I have several YouTube videos that I've just been recently doing that I will use Camtasia Studio and do a screen capture and demonstrate a technique or something that I'm trying to explain to my audience. Mm-hmm. And so when you're all done with that, you have an audio file that is associated with that gets played on YouTube along with the video file that shows the screen as you're moving your mouse and everything. So that gets saved as an MP4. And I was wondering, I said, wonder if there's a way to strip off the audio from this and post it along with my podcast episodes. And, I'm thinking there must be some really complex way to do it. Well, in Spreaker, one of the formats that is supported is MP4. And that is the format that YouTube saves their videos in. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if a transformation is done and they break the MP4 down to MP3 on Spreaker. I know that if you put a WAV file on Spreaker, it will convert it to an MP3. I don't know, I have to look back to see if that happened to this file. But I imported the video file, the MP4, to Spreaker, and it converted it to whatever it had to have. There is no video there, but there is very good audio. So I hadn't had a chance to do a podcast episode for my other podcast, CNC Router Tips, this week because, things had been busy making funeral arrangements, for my sister. So I was able to convert that one in just a few moments and set it up, and that was my episode. So, it's a way of repurposing content that, we hadn't talked about before, but it does work. Now, there is one downside. Spreaker, I have set it up so that whenever I post a new podcast episode, it automatically distributes that podcast over several channels. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. So the audio that I created on YouTube and uploaded to Spreaker, kind of in reverse, then created a new podcast, which it downloaded to iTunes or to YouTube again.
Oh, no. Okay. So it's a duplicate now.
Yeah. So, I just went and deleted the second one that it created because I'm sure that the quality was probably less.
Yeah.
Coming, being transferred twice, but who knows? But, in the time that it took me to find that out, which was, maybe minutes, I had six listens. So I kind of hated to delete that one, but yeah.
I find that what you described just now, if I use my ScreenFlow that I used to do my edits of whether it's audio or video, or capture the screen I could describe, if I was to take, number one, I can also export the audio from that only, and just not have the video, so I have the audio version, right? Mm-hmm. But I can take that file that I created, and I bring it into my GarageBand, mm-hmm. to my Mac, and then only use the audio of that, and then export it as an MP3. Mm-hmm. And now I have an audio file without having to do anything else but import it into GarageBand and export it as an MP3. Bam! I now have an audio file that I can use in my podcast.
Yep. Yeah. So if you were thinking of this process ahead of time, that makes perfect sense. And you're repurposing your content, using it more than once in more than one place, and it's really a cool idea. For me, I didn't think about it until after the fact. So it's nice to know that even after the fact, you've got one method, and before the fact, like you're doing, proactively, there's a method to put your podcast out in more than one format from more than one program.
Yeah, and I think it really is a way to then repurpose your content. Mm-hmm. And because even that, so here it is, you mentioned, we've kind of touched on this in the past, but the idea of now taking that audio file and then creating a text content. So now you have one piece of content being repurposed in three different places. So on YouTube, in your podcast, on your website, in your blog, as a blog post, mm-hmm. that can happen. I was thinking just, I think it was this morning, I was thinking about the fact that there are some sites that people, and maybe I have to go and look it up again and see what the name of that site, but where you could take just the content that you have, and there are people who are writers out there for like $5 to $7 that can take that one piece of content and repurpose it in different ways as a full-blown blog, and so it's different. It's not the same exact text as you would in your show notes. Mm-hmm. It's a full blog post that you can get, that these people can write for you. And now you could have that one piece of content repurposed on YouTube, on your podcast, as show notes, mm-hmm. as a blog. That's take away from that one piece. And then also there are some sites you can go and they can take those, that same blog and pull tweets from that, so that they could take just enough information, mm-hmm. and create a whole set of tweets or social media postings for you. So it's amazing. I know I don't maximize as much as I could, but you think about it. If you really sat down, you could really do a whole bunch of things with that one content that you created.
Yeah. And on another note that is associated with this, when you create a video on YouTube, or, let's say you bring over your podcast episode or whatever, there is a feature built into YouTube that will create automatically a closed caption approximation of what your episode says. Now, because it's computer generated, it's not 100%. If you don't enunciate or you say some weird words, sometimes it will not give you an accurate transcription of what you spoke about in your podcast. But what's cool about it is it's completely editable. So if you open up the closed caption file that is created when your video is uploaded, you can go in and you can correct the words. It might take you 15 minutes to do it, from start to finish for a podcast episode. But when you're done, you have an accurate transcription of it, and you can save that in closed caption. And YouTube actually promotes videos that have closed caption higher than videos that don't.
Okay, let me just take a pause here because you're about to hear something that we left in purposely in this episode because we want to demonstrate how sometimes you may have some adjustment problems or something may happen in your recording, and then what you might want to do, like we are doing right here, is leaving that in, explain what happened, because it could be a learning opportunity for those who are listening. Actually, in this case, you hopefully are learning something or discovering something that you may not have known otherwise. But we're going to tell you ahead of time that when you hear it, you know what is happening. Now let's dive in to where we left off and see if you could identify what the problem was. Actually, we'll tell you.
Your audio just dropped, and I don't know why. Or it went lower.
Oh, really?
Let's see, did I hit something? Say something, please.
Yeah, I was saying I heard a little click earlier, and I'm not sure if something got pulled or.
I really need to label these. Okay.
Because you didn't touch anything. I thought I heard a little thud, like, the thud type of a sound.
Well, I can take it out in the mix. Yeah, but your audio went about half.
Really?
Yeah. I wonder.
Like that?
Yeah, just like that.
Wow.
I see what it was. So, interestingly enough, if while you're podcasting with our setup or whatever, and you turn on a YouTube video,
it pulls the sound.
It drops the sound down and on your Skype call. Interesting. Because I looked to see what the closed caption editing thing was called, and that's when you drop down. So, yeah.
Let's go back and see what the last thing you did, and that's where you tend to find the problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's a good troubleshooting tip. What was the last thing you did?
No, but I think that's a great idea, though, Bill. That I didn't really remember that, and I need to remind myself that I can get the texts that because sometimes for me, I can do a podcast and an interview and whatever case might be, or even like record a podcast like this, and I was just fine. But if I have to go back later on, maybe a week from now, and do editing, I have to listen to the whole thing again to think about what was discussed, to then put that in a show note.
Yeah,
and that takes a lot of time.
Well, you know what? Really cool thing about doing the closed caption part of it through YouTube is it puts times associated with when you said something. So when you download the closed caption file, it's basically a Word document. But when you download it, it also includes all these times at which things were said. So if you wanted to get really detailed on your show notes, what's discussed in the show? Well, at minute 450 or whatever, we were talking about International Podcast Day. But at 3 minutes and 12 seconds, we were talking about the Batmobile. Whatever it is, you'd have an easy way to direct your listeners to just the content that they want to hear about.
And I've seen those timestamps where if you want to hear this exact piece that we discussed, and that's all, you can go to this time in the podcast, just fast forward there, and just listen to that. Of course, it's a sound bite. However, that might just say, hey, I want to hear a little bit more because that sounded really good. Let me see the context where that came from. Mm-hmm. So that is a teaser. So even having that there, it's like, okay, people might be thinking, well, aren't you then discouraging their listener from not listening to the whole podcast? Well, in one sense, maybe, but I think it's like, okay, go and have this taste of this discussion with the idea, if I haven't tasted that, that maybe I want to hear more. So it's like going to the mall sometimes and you see these people at the food court and they hand out a piece of chicken or whatever the case might be and say, hey, just taste, right? And they just gladly give it to you. And you're thinking, man, they're giving a lot of food away. But there's a strategy behind that, because once I taste that thing, that bourbon chicken, that tastes so good.
I love bourbon chicken.
Right, me too, man, right? So I'm going to, guess what? I'm going to go and patronize that place and buy their food. So now all they give me is a small piece of chicken that may have cost them maybe less than a cent for that piece they gave me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to spend $6-7 with them. So I want to get the full deal, the full meal. And that's why I think those timestamps do. It just create a sense of, hey, man, this tastes good. Mm-hmm. I want to see the whole meal. Let me go listen to the whole podcast, So I think it has a plus, an advantage there to use that.
Wow. When you mentioned timestamp, that gave me the idea. You know me, I'm love to Google everything, okay, and find it out. So there is, I just found this in Google. I went to a blog by, I'm going to murder her name, and I apologize in advance, Arlethea Phillips, okay, and it's she's a mother, a wife, a web developer, and a teacher. Anyway, she has how to add timestamp links to your podcast shows as her article. So we'll have a link to this in the show notes. But she's talking about a link timestamp WordPress plugin that will automatically generate timestamps for you inside of your WordPress.
Oh, really?
So I'll have to go and listen to her article and make sure that it's actually delivering what her content suggests. But it's a nice, short, maybe 500-word blog post about it, and she provides a link to that WordPress plugin, and she does an audio file talking about it. So I'm going to check that out because it shows a couple of different timestamps for her episode here as well. So that's so if you want to see that article, it's www.arlethea, ARELE, or let me try that again. ARELTHIA Phillips, PHILLIPS.com. And that's add timestamp link podcast show notes is the basic thing. But there will be a link in the show notes, so you won't have to remember that. But kudos, Arlethea.
That's great, though. I think it's good to have that. And it's interesting that sometimes I've seen timestamp people post in their social media and so on, and I'm thinking, man, it must be a lot of work to do that, because who would want to sit down and go through? In my mind, I'm thinking, because when you don't know something, I'm thinking like, oh, I got to go through and make sure you write down exactly what time that piece came on and then where it ended, and that's a lot of work. I don't have that time time to devote. But there, it can be made easier, as you just described, and seeing, oh wow, there are easier methods to do that. It's coming back to the whole podcast, because sometimes we make some things harder because we just don't know there's an easier method, right? And so, for example, when recording a podcast, people don't go ahead and record a podcast because they're thinking, oh, all the work they have to do. And that's what I love about Podcast by Friday, where it's simply saying, Now you have a minimal. Here's a minimal thing you can do to make it happen. So we kind of we're taking out that stress factor out of it for you as a listener. You don't have to stress it. We have done the stress for you and taken on the stress. Had all the ulcers and everything. We bore the scars of that, so you don't have to.
Yep. Yeah. We'll go out and we'll scout the path for you if you just want to follow along. It's much easier going behind somebody than it is blazing the trail yourself.
And it's already been blazed.
Yeah,
that's what Podcast by Friday is all about, blazing the trail, and so you don't have to go and try to dig into those bushes and stuff to get your trail. We already did that for you.
So very cool. So these are just a few things that you can, that we've discussed in this episode that can help you distribute your content in better and more places more effectively without doing a whole lot of work. Just a few add-ons and plugins and things like that really help get your message out and let you repurpose your content and use it in many ways so that you can use your work, do the work once and use it many times.
Which is, I think, is a great idea. Who want to labor over something when you can make it simpler? I like that just now when you said, do the work once and then repurpose it many, many times. It's good. Yeah.
So, if people would like to hear more about this or to discuss it, they can do that inside of our Facebook group, Podcast by Friday group. That's at facebook.com/groups/Podcast by Friday.
And really, we would love to hear your thoughts because you may have some ideas that we did not mention. And what a great way to share what you might be using or have come across or have heard of. And let us be a support group because we've just shared some things with you that I believe that you may not have known. And we would love to hear what tools you use to make your life easier and more efficient. And so others would benefit from that as well. So that's why the group is there, just to be supportive of each other and help another person avoid the pitfalls and the ulcers that we may have borne. So now they can find a better way to do things and do it more efficiently.
Yeah. What's your favorite tool to help you get more done with less effort? Talk to us about that in our Facebook group, or you can reach us through our email, which is podcast@podcastbyfriday.com.
And, but I think you just asked a good question. Maybe we might need to put this question in there and pose it. What's your favorite tool that you use to make your life less, to make your life simpler or something along
that lines? To simplify your life,
Simplify your life, right? Or your work. So we could put that question in there and so they can go and respond to that question. What about that? That might be helpful. The prompter.
Yeah. Let's do that. We could tweet it out. We could send it to our Facebook following. We could send it on LinkedIn, for that matter. LinkedIn has a lot of groups, by the way, that talk about specific subjects. They are more professional in nature, but they're still a vast group of people on LinkedIn who are following their specific topic of interest.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So,
okay.
So we challenge you to respond to that. What is a tool that you use to help simplify your workflow, your life?
Remember, whatever you may have heard in this episode that you may have missed because you're driving, you were at the gym, or wherever. We took the notes, and you will find the links in the show notes. So if you go to Podcast by Friday /011, Podcast by Friday /011, you'll find all the links mentioned in this show. Hey, good to have you, and I We hope to have you again with us next time.